Hello, welcome back to the THNC podcast. This is actually a special edition that we recorded before the election, but since the election happened, it does change the mood and tone of everything, and the podcast is still very relevant. It's Elon Musk as a social contagion, or Elon Musk as a social contagion, and in a way it's even more relevant now post-election. We're going to do another podcast about the election with some of our thoughts, but in the meantime, we do think it's a very interesting and potentially dark time, but also potentially light time. Mark mentioned in one of our last podcasts that we have to sometimes go backwards on the spiral before we go forwards.
Yes.
And that seems to be what's going on, but it does seem like there's a lot of forward motion as well. We just encourage you to keep your hope up. Speak out. Don't be afraid to speak truth. Speak truth to power, and try to keep love in your heart. Remember that everybody is in their own construct field, and not everyone is coming from the most pure place in their heart, but it's because there's something in their past, something in their background, and that's what we have to say about that. But this Elon Musk podcast, I think you'll enjoy.
Yeah, and especially it's interesting to see talking about him right before the election, and then now we're putting it up after. And just invite you, when you're watching this, to see if you could sense the difference in the construct field. Because we were in this different field and talking about Elon Musk and what he's doing in a fairly hopeful environmental field. And so a lot of what's changed in the election may actually make it harder for Elon to do what he's trying to do.
Right.
They might be more pushback now.
They might try to cut some of the tax breaks he has and other things like that. So there's a lot of hostility towards climate change things in particular, because we have a fossil fuel economy which has a very large influence in Washington, and Elon Musk is a direct threat to the entire fossil fuel economy.
And right now it appears that the fossil fuel companies are going to have a lot more power.
Yes, possibly.
It looks like that. It's starting to look like that. So.
Depends how much we resist. And we talked a little bit about the Dakota Access Pipeline as well, which is still an ongoing issue, and still, in a way, it seems like a front line for empire confronting itself, because you have people forced at gunpoint to get their tribal lands. But we talked about a lot of that in the podcast. I also just note that, going along with what Mark said, we just noticed today an article about a fake news story about Elon Musk and how you can start to expect to see more actual propaganda, fake news being generated from dark sources somewhere that are attacking Elon Musk. They're always attacking him based on his reliability. I saw a thing about how Consumer Reports, this is something new again since the podcast, that I learned that Consumer Reports delisted the Model S, which they originally rated as the best car they'd ever tested. Pretty exceptional, and now they've delisted it because it has some reliability problems. It's kind of a very much the product of the rational industrial age to assess a car based on its reliability, as if that should be one of the most important factors, when the Model S is a revolutionary car technologically from top to bottom. If it's more reliable than any car that's commercially made now, that's a miracle already. I mean, if it's more reliable than a Yugo, that's a miracle, considering how amazing it is, because they also said in the same article that 97% of Tesla owners would buy another Tesla. So Tesla owners obviously are in a different construct field than the let's buy a Honda because it's the most reliable car.
Yeah, well, in a way, Elon Musk is approaching this as a Silicon Valley startup. And the customers kind of hold that field that we're at a frontier, this is experimental, this is like, what do they call it? We're beta testing.
Beta testing, right.
So it's like, and it's like...
And a lot of the customers are ahead of the curve as far as recognizing climate change and recognizing how crucial it is, and how we don't have time to continue to screw around.
And this is a political action on their part.
Right,
actually.
so this moment of this election happening at the same time is very...
a lot of
interesting tension, but it's also a lot of awakening, I think. Anyway, I think you're going to enjoy the podcast. We do talk about all these issues. They're all still completely relevant. And once again, I'll say here, which I say in the podcast, if you haven't watched some of Elon Musk's talks when he introduced the Gigafactory and the solar roof and the Mars one, they're all phenomenal. They're a blast to watch. He's very entertaining. He's a nerd. He's smart, and he's great. Anyway, enjoy the podcast, and we'll see you next time. Welcome back to the THNC podcast. Here's a special edition on Elon Musk as a social contagion. Should say that that's a good thing in this case, because Elon Musk is our hero, and in this case it's a good one, but let's first define a social contagion. You were looking at some different definitions, I guess.
Well, basically, what it is that a person or an idea or behavior pattern or a perceptual field can be communicated across social spaces, and it can become infectious.
Right. Through contact is the way they say. So it's either contact with an idea or physical contact in the case of a physical contagion like typhoid fever, which we think is a bad thing.
Or behavioral contagion is one of the most normal ones, which is when we're around somebody who's doing certain behaviors, we tend to kind of mimic them.
Right. People talk about,
unconsciously.
in the bad sense, people talk about suicide clusters, which can happen. It's been well documented for actually hundreds of years, starting going back to a Goethe. Goethe had a novel in which the protagonist killed himself, and apparently many young people in Europe killed themselves, and people thought it was infectious. But
it's beyond that. I mean, it's every day in film where I'm from, and you're from also. If you get a group of actors together and one of them is a brilliant actor, it brings everybody up.
everybody gets better, right?
Yeah.
So a social contagion, basically an idea, a concept, spread to contact with the idea. And Elon Musk, we think, is a social contagion. He has a very specific interest. We're just looking that Tesla did, in fact, change their mission statement. It used to be to help accelerate the world's transition to sustainable transportation. And now it just says energy instead of transportation, because he's revealed what someone dubbed his grand unified theory of alternative energy, which is to have the
car,
the house, and the storage.
Yeah.
So you could generate your own power, store it yourself, charge your own car, and be entirely off the grid on your major energy uses all day long. Mind-blowing thing to do. Nobody saw it coming. This one review we saw online said that they didn't know when they were there, that when the people at the press were at this set, which is the Desperate Housewives set, they did not know that the roof was a solar roof. They just were thought that it looked like a kind of slightly artificial set, which is what it is. It's houses that are actually on a back lot for Desperate Housewives, but they redid all the houses, they put all these solar roofs on, and it almost was invisible until everybody looked at them and then said, whoa. So he startled them all, and he created this vision now that people can have. He made it concrete.
Yeah. But even before this, he was becoming this exemplar in that he was representing a conscious capitalist where we haven't had really exemplars in the fields out there. Before him, it was Steve Jobs, which, he's brilliant and all that and really powerful and all that, but he was not oriented towards the social good.
Well, he wasn't
much.
oriented towards a systemic critique, I would say.
Right.
So you could say the social good, it wasn't, he wanted to give people power and give them the power to do amazing stuff, and he did, and the iPhone and smartphones in general are quite an astonishing tool, but he never seemed like he was driven by that, hey, this is going to help bring more freedom to the world.
Right.
It's more like it'll help people be great creators and do great things and that kind of general thing. Musk, I've argued before, is using the tools of capitalism to subvert capitalism,
Yes.
or at least to subvert one of the major underpinnings of capitalism, which is this extractive consciousness, which is sort of personified in fossil fuels. We will extract as much as possible. We will destroy the land everywhere we need to in order to get this fuel. We will burn this fuel, which pollutes our environment and makes... So it's literally a death cult, but people inside it can't see it. No. That's what The Emperor Has No Clothes is about. It's about the inability to see the truth right in front of us despite the evidence. And now more and more people intellectually know that fossil fuels are damaging, and younger people who actually have to inherit the earth that we have lived on for a long time are saying, hey, wait a minute, is there going to be anything left to inherit? And all these things are coming together, and now Elon Musk clearly is of the consciousness that this is a real problem, we have to solve it now, and we can't wait for governments, we can't wait for other companies to do it, we have to be the change we want to see in the world, and he's done this amazing thing, I think.
And that's a great example. He's being an example. It's not just the products he's producing, it's what he's doing is actually
right.
part of the contagion.
Yeah, because he's expressing the consciousness field, the field of consciousness of renewable energy in which you're not polluting, in which you have zero effect on the environment. He's expressing that as that's how everything that we do has to be that way, is essentially the way he's putting it. So therefore, we obviously do it that way. And then once you see that example, then you're much less willing to tolerate everyone else who doesn't do that. And you're like, well, wait a minute, why don't these other companies do it? And then you start to look at who are the most egregious violators of this sort of ethic and rules, and the oil companies, and the fossil fuel companies, and the car companies, and there's all these companies that he's disrupting.
Well, we can't forget that this is about a transition from one stage to another, and the fossil fuel companies and the standard construct field for the corporate state from the rational industrial age, which we are moving
out of.
Is basically you want to make the most money. He who makes the most money wins. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of like there's your target, is what you're doing. You're doing this only to make money.
Right. Although you could argue that all of the great innovations in capitalism were born out of something else. If you look at even like Bell Telephone and Edison and all these, so the sort of mythic American inventors, even the people who built railroads and who built all this stuff,
yeah,
they cornered a market and made money, but they also had a vision of connecting people, or some sort of
part of it. Connected to that, but that's from our mythic structure as well, which is we have this American kind of ingenuity thing, and we need to discover. This whole discovery thing is a big thing that helps to drive it, like the space race. We have that in us, but but
in what way is that mythic? The discovery, you said that's from our mythic?
The mythic journey, yeah.
The mythic journey. So the mythic journey to discover more and learn more.
Yeah,
that's out of mythic consciousness.
That's from mythic, yeah.
But so it obviously has a place even in a pluralistic or integral world, that urge to explore. That's part of the integration.
Yeah. Well, as we evolve, as we individuals and societies and cultures, every stage we pass through is still there. It's done through a process of transcend and include.
Transcend and include. Right.
So we still have all of the stages in us, and we operate out of them all the time for different circumstances in different ways.
Right. So Elon Musk, in a way, he's helping us transcend and include capitalism because he's still working within the structures of capitalism. Yes. He's got a company. He's negotiating the best deals he can from every supplier. And as he gets bigger and becomes the supplier of everything, he's going to have a lot of leverage.
But we have to understand, too, that he's shifting, as part of this, the locus of success. So he's not talking about, I'm going to increase the money for the shareholders. He's not talking about, everyone's going to be buying this product. He does, but the first thing he leads with is the planet's in trouble. What we're doing is we have to do something. That's his.
Right.
It's kind of like it becomes his prime directive. Whereas it kind of takes some of the energy away from the financial success or the product success. I've delivered a beautiful product, and he wants to do all that, but that's not like the center of gravity. Mm-hmm. And he's changing the center of gravity.
He discussed that at his. First of all, we encourage everyone to watch everything Elon Musk ever does. He's had a bunch of amazing press conferences for his Gigafactory, the battery factory.
It's big for a reason.
There just wasn't enough factory capacity anywhere else in the world. We didn't have an option.
It'll be the biggest building in the world, biggest single building in the world by footprint. Figure roughly this one factory will produce as much as the rest of the world combined.
Yes!
He had one about SpaceX and his Mars mission.
This is to give you a sense of size. It's quite big.
And he just had this one about the solar roofs, and they're all amazing because they're all sort of mind-blowing expansions of what has been. And he did, during the Mars one, he addressed his accumulation of wealth, and he said, I accumulate wealth for the purpose of being able to finance these projects. So I don't think he was really addressing it with that in mind, but it kind of put a slice into all the people who are acquiring for the sake of acquiring when you see someone like that, who's an example, who says, I just acquire so I can fund these things that are important for saving the world. And I do think the Mars mission is part of this idea that we might or might not survive, catastrophic things can happen, both through terrorism and through, you know, a meteor hitting this Earth or all kinds of other things, super volcano. There's a lot of things that could take us all out as a species. So having us be off-world on another place might be necessary to the survival of the species, and he knows that. At the same time, he's also like, I think we can survive. At least there's hope in Tesla. Tesla seems like it is bred of optimism and hope. And that's another part of the construct field that he's taking down, because a lot of people, I think, have pessimism as one of their construct fields without realizing it. They think they just see the world as it is, but they're actually pessimistic because everything around you is telling you that things are bad. The media kind of gives you this worldview that's very dysfunctional and sick, but doesn't tell you that. The media never points to, here's solutions that are happening here, 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 here. That's what we were talking about this in our climate change one. They talk about how climate change is happening with this kind of jaunty headline on it, but they never say, but the good news is here's some people working. We're going to now profile only people who are working to change this. And that would encourage all the kids growing up and studying science to like study environmental science and study science and engineering and the things that they can help save the world. And all these things are obvious, and yet they're totally suppressed in this culture. It's a distraction engine. It's a kind of cancer that can't stop itself. And Elon Musk is like an antidote to that. He's a contagion of antivirus or a contagion of positive thinking. Because when you look at Tesla, you say, oh, it is actually possible for us to rather quickly transition to alternative energy.
But what he's doing is he's creating that pattern by how he approaches the problem. Like, you know, with the electric car, he looked at it and said, all right, everyone thinks electric cars have no power, they have no range.
They're boring.
And they're boring and this
not
and that.
stylish.
So he took that and then he went, let's fix all that.
It goes from 0 to 125 miles an hour without any gear change. There's no clutch or anything.
And it goes more than 200 miles on a single charge.
More than 200 miles single charge. It accelerates from 0 to 60 miles an hour in 3.9 seconds. So it's basically got supercar performance. It's got better acceleration than a Ferrari or an Aston Martin.
He went after construct fields.
Right.
I mean, you talked about how he's actually attacking construct fields.
Yeah,
So the
and
electric
there's this
car
hope.
construct field.
There's this hope energy because he's looking at what's wrong and not going, well, that sucks. He's saying, all right, how can I fix that? How could I do the opposite?
Right. It's
That's what he
also
does with the houses, the roof now.
Yep.
It's like, how can we make these beautiful, cheaper, stronger, you know?
And just you wait, this guy mentioned, or some other articles mentioned, that they're probably going to be pretty expensive at first. It's going to be kind of a luxury item. Oh, he's, you know, in his calculations that it's going to be, if you factor in the roof plus all the electricity over 20 years, it's cheaper. Maybe, maybe not, but that's going to be used as a line of attack, and you should be aware of that, because the mainstream media is always, because they have a pessimistic worldview, they're always looking for the ways to knock people down. I had this argument with a friend of mine about his finances, and he's saying, well, he might not be able to make it happen, his finances might not be all that stable, and I had to explain to him, you're playing into that worldview that says that the financial stability of a company is how it should be judged or what should be discussed. When that's almost irrelevant except to investors. You know, I'm interested in what he's doing now, and I'm interested in the consciousness that it's breeding, because everybody who sees that house and car and battery combination wants that now. Like, I can't imagine anyone in Silicon Valley who has a fair amount of cash, and there's a lot of people with a fair amount of cash. I can't see anyone redoing their roof with anything other than a solar roof, and more people are having trouble seeing themselves buying any car other than a Tesla.
Yeah. Let's come back around to what you just started with on that, was besides the pessimism, why he's being attacked by the media, you know, or ignored or attacked, is that the old system is sending out the antibodies to kill the new contagion.
Right.
Because his contagion, his example is bringing us towards the next level. And so
Yeah.
the old level has to kind of try to protect itself. You know?
Yeah, you can look at that 1, 2, 3 punch and see $1 trillion in business evaporating in the next 5 years from
Disruption.
car companies, disruption car companies, power companies, roofing companies, all kinds of other electrical things could potentially be electrified. Although he still says we're going to need power companies because our need for electricity is going to go up rather than down. Probably so, but I can't see that power companies are going to be generating as much electricity as they are now.
But look at the kind of like you were saying earlier, actually, before the podcast, that right now there's a lot of construct fields being, well, we talked about this the
Being
other day.
upended.
Upended and all that, and being brought to the surface. And we have Elon Musk's example here of the conscious capitalist. We have, in the political realm, we've got the misogynist.
We've got patriarchy, we've got white supremacy and white normative culture, all these different fields
Things
that
are-
are being upended all at the same time in a way. And Elon Musk is like putting the nail in the coffin by saying, here's the alternative, I'm making it. So it's not just visioning it,
Yeah.
it's making it and actually making something better than anything that's existed before. The Tesla's a nicer car than anything that's existed before. The roof seems like a better roof. The battery is going to be better than any storage system that's ever existed before. So he also, it helps that he's obviously a genius. I mean, he can shepherd these things through. He has a pretty good grasp of all the technology he's working on for all his companies. And he's about to buy Solar City probably, which is the largest installer of solar. So he's going to have a company that can that can scale.
Yeah. Now, I want to bring us back to one more thing here, too. Right when he did the announcement for the solar roof, what was also going on in our world was North Dakota.
North Dakota, the pipeline. That's a
look at-
big issue we haven't talked about as much, but
And I mean, here you have this example of a sustainable lifestyle and world that can be born. And you have the death throes of the rational industrial complex is basically fighting tooth and nail against the native peoples.
the fact that they're stripping native peoples and throwing them in kennels and putting dogs on them to build an oil pipeline across a waterway, which they previously tried to put across the white people's area, and the white people in Bismarck said, we don't want that thing here. And so then they said, okay, we'll put it to these poor Indians who have no political power, and we'll just force them to take it. And the Indian people said, no, we don't want that either. And so they said, okay, we'll force you at gunpoint to take the thing that the white people wouldn't take in order to put an oil pipeline across the water that you need to drink and live. The optics couldn't be more profound. And yet, of course, the coverage of that is typically in mainstream media form as a very he said, she said, and Hillary Clinton's statement about that is like, we think that all parties should come to the table and we have to respect the rights of the native people and the rights of the drillers and the rights of the... And that's one of those not only spineless statements, but it's really, it's keeping quiet in the face of a crime against humanity, in my opinion.
And Bernie Sanders' letter, though, that was great.
Right.
I mean, he-
Bernie Sanders, of course,
he
has
said-
spoken up and said we shouldn't do it. Jill Stein has said, of course, we shouldn't do this, and it's a disgrace. And, But yes, the optics couldn't be more profound that all these things are happening together at once. And the largest prison strike in history, it should be said when we talk about construct fields, which has been almost not covered at all. And people who go on strike in various prisons are being punished and tortured and thrown into solitary confinement in America.
But-
and these things don't get covered either. So
But just the environmental issue between what Elon was doing last week and what was happening in North Dakota, having those two happening simultaneously, I thought was a great kind of visceral representation of the cusp that we're at.
Well, that thing of breaking construct fields, I say, when you give people the ability to envision it with something concrete, it makes it easier for them to feel it down here as well as just up here. So everyone knows that theoretically you can get solar. I don't think a lot of people realize that the price and efficiency of solar has been going on this curve. So it's just inevitable that it was going to hit that moment when solar is now cheaper than actually getting power from the grid and cheaper than getting coal and all these things. And that's now happening. And Elon Musk has been pushing that forward, and his cousins who own Solar City have been pushing that forward by just getting more solar out there. And now everybody's making solar panels. And then back to that idea of him as a capitalist, we should probably wrap up in a minute so we don't go on too long. But this discussion I was having with my friend also, and he was saying, oh, but I mean, a lot of other people can start making these cars, and a lot of other people can start making these solar thing, as if that's a bad thing, and Elon Musk is going to be upset if he has competition. And I think pretty self-evidently, Elon Musk would love to have competition. In fact, he wants no one to be making anything other than electric cars.
That's why he's open sourcing so much of what he's doing.
Right. He would like everyone to be making solar roofs and solar panels. Batteries, I'm sure he'd like everyone to make them, although he's pretty much not waiting for anyone to make them, just scaling up. So, I mean, they're going to have more battery capacity than all the rest of the world combined, I believe, pretty soon. So,
But he's putting out there this new model of the entrepreneur. Right now, a brand new series on CBS, Pure Genius, is kind of coming off of the Musk persona,
Another
the
Musk
exemplar.
character.
And there's a billionaire who cares about trying to create, a better world and save lives, and and using the money for that.
So he's starting to infect everything now, basically. We're going to see a lot of Elon Musk characters in media and popular culture and that too. And that's great, because the more people have role models, whether they're fake role models or real role models, if they're role models who are consciously trying to change the world, that's great, because that gets people thinking, what could I do to be like that? And young people and kids who are studying science and technology. And
He's doing this thing where, he's taking electric cars that were ugly and not fast and that's making them fast and sexy and all that. But he's also taking the entrepreneur.
right. And it's that thing, it's not just saying you're about helping people, but actually being, every step of the company is trying to be as green and environmental and renewable and to have as low impact, a low environmental impact as possible.
Yeah,
with the
it's not
maximum-
like big corporations who have an environmental
greenwash.
program.
Right, who greenwash. Right.
Well, even if they're trying, like, they're recycling and all this stuff, but this is more like, this is the mission. This is
a model, right. So,
that you can, and what he's saying is you could save the world and make money
and excel.
and excel. It doesn't have to be one or the other.
Right. So anyway, he's a great figure. He's a social contagion. We love him. We love you, Elon. And we'll see you guys the next time. We have a whole podcast up about construct fields that you might get to see, and keep an eye out. Thanks a lot.
Peace out.